Hello and happy Friday, and thanks for tuning into RadioFreeRhinecliff.org. And this show in particular, correct me if I'm Norm. I'm your host, Norm, and I'm thrilled to be here right now with Cynthia Burke. Cynthia, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Cynthia, we met, I think, like last week.
Yes.
The Rotary Club was kind enough to host a small group from Radio Free Rhinecliff.
Right.
And at some point in there, they were passing around a pig, and people were putting $1 in the pig for what was it called?
Well, it's either a happy buck or a sad buck or whatever you want.
Oh, I didn't hear anybody put it in a sad buck.
No, it was a good day. They were mostly happy bucks.
But people put their happy bucks in there, and one of the first people to go was you.
Right.
And do you remember what you said?
I do. I put in a buck hoping, please let me not become that which I abhor.
And I loved that so much that when it came around, like 20 minutes later, it took forever, to me, I quoted you, or I tried to, because it was so good. I totally stole your happy buck thought.
Well, it's really easy to, especially in these divided and divisive times that we are living in, it's very easy to behave exactly like all of the people that we're hating and not liking what they're doing, et cetera. And I don't see that solves anything.
Right.
I remember years ago, and can I cuss on the air?
Yeah, you can.
I remember years ago in an Al-Anon meeting, someone saying, pray for the son of a bitch, then you can't resent him.
I like that idea.
Yes, exactly.
Pray for then you can't resent him.
Yeah.
So what are some of the other things that you abhor, that you would like to not become?
Well, let me just back up a little bit, because when people say to me, how are you?
Yeah.
I always stop and I think, in this moment, my hair is not on fire. I'm clothed, I'm fed, I'm housed. I have people in my life who care about me. I'm fine if I'm in this moment. But if I look back at what I've already come through, dodgy, and I look down the road where it could be going, that's a little shivers my timbers.
Right.
So the challenge is to be exactly where I am in the moment I'm in, and I'm always fine no matter what's happening.
So when you're in the moment, a part of being in that moment is counting your blessings, that you're fed and housed and healthy and all those things. Is that right?
Well, it's a little more deeply spiritual than that, in the sense that it's sensing my body and feeling my presence in this moment of life.
Okay.
Which is the only one I have.
Sure.
And I've been practicing this for half a century, so it's not something I just came to overnight.
Being present and being in your body.
Yes,
working
in that way.
Now, I read somewhere online that you were a student or aficionado of Gurdjieff.
Yes.
Is this part of that practice?
Exactly.
Okay, the work.
Yes, the Gurdjieff work.
Right. And how did you first get involved in that?
Oh, my God. When I was in my 20s, first of all, when I graduated from college.
Okay. Which was Houston?
My last 2 years of college, I was at the University of Houston, and that's where I got my degree.
Let me just stop you here. But how did you get from, because you're from Worcester, Mass.
Right.
Where did you say you were born?
I was born in Northampton. I went to a liberal arts junior college my first 2 years of college called Pine Manor. It's now a 4-year school. Actually, I think it's now part of BC, Boston College.
Okay.
That notwithstanding, I went to Pine Manor for 2 years, and my college friends, many of them were from Houston, from wealthy families in Houston. Those were the days when you sent your daughters to school to find a husband. And most of these classmates came from boarding schools, so they thought Pine Manor was freedom. And I came from a public high school in Worcester, Massachusetts, and I thought I'd been sent to prison. So
Isn't that funny?
It was like, but I kept getting invited to Houston to be in this one's wedding, that one's wedding, and the people in Houston kind of treated me like some sort of an oddity that was amusing to them.
Right.
And I had a pretty good time. It was good. And then without giving you every little nitty gritty of this, I decided to transfer after 2 years of Pine Manor. I wanted to keep going to school.
So this is like 59, 60? Or...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. 59, I went to the University of Houston, and I graduated in January of 61. Went immediately to Manhattan and lived there for 61 years.
Oh, my goodness.
Convinced that there was no other place on planet Earth that I could possibly live, not even Brooklyn. And there I sat, and eventually I got married. My husband and I lived in a 9-room Upper West Side pre-war building apartment.
Classic pre-war.
Yeah, right. I had 3 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. I mean, I had really a pretty nice deal going there.
Uh-huh.
And then, so the first third of my life, I was in my career. I worked as an actor, did mostly television commercials. I have one tiny moment of ignominy in Ordinary People.
Oh, nice.
I don't have white hair because that was many years ago. As you can see, I now have white hair. Anyway, I have a scene with Donald Sutherland in that movie, just a tiny little scene. But that's my 1 minute in film history. Other than that, I did a ton of commercials, traveled all over the country doing all kinds of stuff, made a ton of money.
I'll bet.
Sent my kids to fancy schools and summer camps, and we were part of the White Wine and Volvo set, and we went to St. Bart's on vacations, and it was all very fancy. And then I became part of an environmental organization that was started by Eileen Goldman and Lola Redford. Eileen Goldman being married to William Goldman, the screenwriter, and Lola Redford obviously married to Robert Redford. These women met when their husbands were doing Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. It was around the time people were all moving back to the farms and saving the land and all of that stuff that was going on just prior to the first Earth Day. And these women wanted to do something on behalf of the environment. And they decided, I mean, Bill Goldman was never going to leave Manhattan, and the Redfords already had, half of the Wasatch Mountain Range in Utah. So they decided to each bring their women friends together, and we would meet and talk about what we thought we could do. And I was a friend of Eileen Goldman's. And these women, I think there were 25 of us, I can't remember the exact number, but we were all asked to pick an area of interest that we wanted to find out as much as we could about it as lay people. My particular area of interest was food additives, how food is grown, that segued to land use, that segued to water, that segued to energy, that segued to solar energy. Lola Redford and I did created a solar energy slideshow with a grant from the Department of Energy, DOE, in D.C., and we traveled all over the country with that slideshow. And we also, in 1978, in Manhattan, we had Sunday, as in the sun shining day in New York, and there was an entire front page of the Daily News picture from top to bottom of what we were doing. We created a women's energy toolkit, which we traveled around. So while all this was happening, and I was becoming an environmental saint, altruistic Alice here, I couldn't do vaginal sprays that say you're never going to have sex again if you don't buy this product. I couldn't do use this laundry detergent because the waterways were dying because of phosphates in detergents.
Right.
We became public interest lobbyists. We got phosphates out of detergents.
Wow.
We got full ingredient labeling in cosmetics. We did no-fault auto insurance. We did so many things.
Amazing.
And because of my skills, if you will, for lack of a better word, I was able to talk in front of all kinds of people about these issues. And I remember talking to a group of business people in Manhattan, mostly men, We noticed as we were studying about our environmental issues that most of the bad things were done by men, but we decided not to make this an issue about women versus men. We figured we have to bring the men along with us because we're all in this together. Anyway, here I was in front of this group of people talking about recycling. And they were saying, yes, but, yes, but, yes, but, yes, but. And I just stopped. And I said, I need to ask you all a question. Are you breathing some air that I'm not breathing? Are you drinking some water that I'm not drinking? Are you eating food grown on some land that my food is not grown on? I said, the garbage, it's right up here, and pretty soon it's going to be over our heads and it will be too late. This is not whether or not you think recycling is good. We have to address these problems. This was in 1970, please. Okay, so we had the first Earth Day, 1970. My income, and this was in the 70s now, my income from the commercials I said I couldn't do because I just couldn't make myself do it. It just made me ill. My income was off $35,000 in 1 year. So, I was making a lot of money. So, I would love to say that it was altruism, but I couldn't do it. I just could not do it.
Right.
So, with Redford and the Charles and Ray Eames of the Eames Chair, got together in a meeting to talk about doing a solar film. And in fact, it's called The Solar Film, and you can YouTube it and find it. It was nominated for an Academy Award, a live-action, small whatever feature thing, called The Solar Film. I remember the Eameses at the meeting saying to Redford, well, we've always just done films about things we're interested in. We've never had anybody ask us to do anything before. And Redford said, that's interesting. People ask me all the time.
Right.
Anyway, that film had me as part of the crew with my married name, which was Cynthia Stein. So when you see the credits, it doesn't say Cynthia Burke, it says Cynthia Stein. But that was a wonderful project to work on.
I'd like to see that on YouTube.
Yeah. It's called The Solar Film. And it was Wildwood Enterprises, which is Redford's production company, and others. Anyway, so I trundled along becoming this environmentalist. So in the first third of my life, it was my career and traveling and making a lot of money and meeting a lot of rich and famous people and having a glamorous life. And then the middle part was marriage, motherhood. I have a son, 54, and a daughter, 51. All of that was in that time. Being an environmentalist, all of that was in that middle section. And then, alas, divorce. And now I'm up here for what is the third period and the last period of my life. And I just want to say one thing about when I got here. And that is, I decided that I would show up for everything.
Right.
Everywhere I saw a sign for a meeting or whatever, I showed up for everything and to see what resonated, where I could give, where I could get. And mind you, money is a huge problem for me, but I'm doing fine with Social Security and my modest Screen Actors Guild pension, and I'm kind of bopping along. But I've never been busier. I've never been more interested or interesting about everything that's going on up here. I say to my friends in Manhattan that Rhinebeck is like a small village with a very sophisticated population.
Right.
And
how long have you been here?
I've about 2.5 years.
And why Rhinebeck?
Well, do you remember a man named Hal Douglas who was a voiceover guy? There's a piece of him in a Seinfeld movie where he's doing a recording in a studio. You want to Google that one. It's hilarious. Anyway, Hal Douglas was the voice of everything.
Okay.
I remember going to a movie in Paris, and I went to it because Redford was starring in the movie, and I was curious, and it was dubbed, and they had the worst voice for him, the French actor for him. But in that theater, there were 5 coming attractions of American films, and they were all narrated by Hal Douglas.
Oh, that's funny. I'll
5
check
of
him
them.
out. I remember Hal Riney, who was a famous
Hal
voiceover
Douglas.
guy.
Anyway, Hal, he and his wife lived in Manhattan. Then they moved to Pawling. They had Strawberry Hill Farm, part of Lowell Thomas's estate up there. And then they moved to Virginia. They had a farm in Virginia, and Ruth was British. She was brought over to America from London by the model people. I can't remember their names now, but the people who Ruth was. She was the kind of the person who ran the TV part of the Ford modeling agency. She was Eileen Ford brought her over here.
Okay.
Yeah, and so she met Hal. She and Hal got married. They moved to, and when they moved to Virginia, Ruth took up or continued her horsing, as her husband used to say. My wife doesn't ride; she equitates. And anyway, they were friends, and they moved back to. Hal died on the 13th of 2013. He was 90-something. I was with him before he died, and he was the one who introduced me to the Gurdjieff work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so as he was dying, I thanked him, 1, for my spiritual path, 2, for marrying Ruth and creating for me a sister friend who's, to this day, we're very close. And Ruth had 1 child with Hal, a daughter, who is a year younger than my daughter, and these little girls kind of grew up together. Her daughter, Sarah Douglas, is a therapist in a practice here called Maverick. She
Over in Woodstock?
Yes, exactly. She's a therapist. Anyway, they live up here, and they've been trying to get me up here forever. And I kept saying, no, I couldn't possibly. Couldn't see. And then one day, I noticed, well, I could probably do that, And then the times when I thought I could do it sort of outnumbered the times I thought I could never do it or would never want to do it. And suddenly it became, I said, first of all, I'm never going to want a house. I don't want a house. Never going to buy a house. Can't buy a house. But even if I could, I don't want one. So where was I? Okay, so there's a place up here called the Woods, which is
right.
And most people who have condominiums live there, but some people own them and rent them. I rented a condominium from a lawyer from Long Island, and I had a 2-year lease with a 3rd-year option. And it was wonderful. I loved it. And I was from the 12th floor of an apartment building on the Upper West Side, I'm now at ground level, and I have a heron that visits me every morning in my front yard, and there's
that's nice.
Snapping turtles, and it was just fabulous.
Were you on a pond? They have some ponds.
I was on the pond,
okay.
yeah. Okay, so in the end of my 2-year lease comes a 3rd-year option, and my landlord wants $500 extra a month on the $2,800 I was already paying.
Egads.
So I had to move, and I was fortunate to find a place still here in Rhinebeck, an apartment at the lower level of a 2-story house.
Oh, nice.
At a rent I could afford, and that's where I am now. But also up here is a young actress named Mary Stuart Masterson, and I'm her godmother.
Oh, nice.
And so
I've been trying. She keeps saying, "Oh, I'll come on the show."
Oh yeah. Actually, I'm going to her house for Thanksgiving, so I'll tell her that.
Oh, good. Give her a hard time for me.
But her mother and I met doing a play at the Alley Theater when we were 18 and 19 years old, respectively. Carl and Glenn Masterson. And we became friends through all those years, and we shared a country house in Katona with her family, and that's how all that happened. Anyway.
Wow.
Yeah, Carlin died. I guess it will be 2 years in July, or maybe 3 years. I'm terrible at keeping track of time, but
right.
But
so now I've got a gajillion questions about your life already. When you were an actress, what were some of the roles that you really dreamed of being able to do one day? If you had any.
I really, I played Peter Pan when I was in high school, but I was not a musical performer. I don't sing. I could dance pretty much, but when people ask me why did I want to be an actor, and I say because for me it was a safe place to explore aspects of myself that I didn't dare do in real life.
Okay.
And so I had wonderful acting teachers, well-known acting teachers in Manhattan, but the draw for the money and then the children and the traveling and the this and that and the environment, changing the world and saving it, it all got kind of mishmashed together.
Right.
So to say, what was there anything that I would want to do? I'd love to do something now. I think it would be fun, but
Yeah. Well, there's lots of community theater around.
I know, but I'm too busy being a Rotarian now.
Now, does that take up a lot of time? I think.
Oh my God, are you kidding me?
No, I'm not.
I need a social secretary just to keep track of my Rotary schedule.
Well, what kinds of things do you do as a Rotarian?
I'm next week going to be doing some sort of a class to become an empathic listener.
Oh.
That's a new thing. I was part of we started to embrace a DEI thing, but that's kind of gotten tabled. I mostly just kind of show up for whatever I'm asked for.
Right. And you said when you landed here in Rhinebeck, you showed up to everything.
Right.
What were some of the other things that stuck?
The first thing I showed up for was, it turned out to be some kind of a gathering at the pavilion at Arbor Ridge. And it was being run by Rhinebeck at Home, which is Nina Lynch and Ann Bruckner, who started Rhinebeck at Home for 20 plus years ago or something. And someone told me to look for Nina after the meeting, and she would tell me whatever I needed to know. So at that meeting, they were talking about the toll that the pandemic had taken on the workforce in terms of people that were available to help elderly people.
Okay.
People that weren't necessarily medical professionals, but just helper type people, and they had kind of vanished. And I raised my hand. I said, has anybody thought about speaking to high school students about this? Because they don't need to be medical professionals to do some of these things, and this might be a good thing. P.S. Afterwards, a woman came up to me named Sarita Winthrop, and Sarita said, I liked what you said, and she said, I'm interested in doing something with kids too, and would you come to a Rotary lunch with me next week? I said, okay. So I went to 1, 2, 3 Rotary lunches, and finally I was trying to pay for my 3rd Rotary lunch, and Joe Phelan, who was the president of Rotary at the time, said, I said, I'm trying to pay for my lunch. He said, this is your last free lunch. I said, okay. He said, we'd like you to become a member. I said, all right. So I became a member, and it's just been, rolling around since then. Now, what the really fun part about the Rhinebeck at Home thing is, it turned out that Nina Lynch's condo in the woods was directly across the street from me.
Oh, nice.
So I could see her in her garden every day, and when she drove away and came back, so it was really like having someone on tap that I could refer to. Right. And I just kept doing it all. I just kept showing up wherever I went. There's so much to be done.
Yeah.
But also part of it was and this is going to sound really snobby, and I'm sorry about that, but growing up or living for 61 years in Manhattan, only when I moved away did I realize that I was living on an entirely different planet.
Right.
And some things that I am completely comfortable and okay with, people up here are just kind of beginning to pay attention to. So I had to
Examples?
How they deal with illness and death and dying. Oh, well, I missed a whole big chunk after my environmental whatever. I stopped doing commercials. I started working as a temporary employee through some temp agency, and it turns out that I was every time a Goldman Sachs executive was going on vacation, they would request me to come in and sit in for when whoever was going away. And it turned out that taking an accurate telephone message, spelling someone's name right, was a skill. Woohoo! Who knew? But I did this temp thing, hoping to see if there was something that might interest me, that I could move in another direction.
Right.
And I was making a little bit of money doing that, but that was beside the point. During this time, the following thing happened. Mike Nichols, the late Mike Nichols, and Cynthia O'Neill, who was married to Patrick O'Neill, the ginger man and all the O'Neill restaurants, Mike and Cynthia O'Neill had been friends for 1,000,000 years, and they were concerned about what was happening to their community around the HIV virus. And so they decided they wanted to create an organization where people could just come and be with what they had. This was before anybody knew how the virus was transmitted. This was before anybody knew there were any treatments, and people were dying all over the place.
Right.
Friends of Mike Nichols dying.
In the arts world, in the acting
Rudolf
world.
Nureyev, for example.
Right.
So they created an organization called Friends in Deed. 3 words, Friends in Deed. And Cynthia O'Neill said to me, well, you're looking to change your career. Why don't you come on board with us? Because she was a friend of mine. Why don't you come on board this? I said, well, what will I do? She said, we'll figure it out. Well, we figured it out for 25 years.
Wow.
That was in 1991 that we began. In 2000, I spent a year at a seminary and became an ordained interfaith minister. Not because I found God, but because with my minister's ticket to ride, so to speak, I could be with people who were ill and dying in hospitals without being a family member. I could just have access to them willy-nilly. And so I was... As a
chaplain, as an ordained minister, you had access in hospitals that other people might not.
Right. You'd have to be a family member or whatever.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, yeah. So
you'd flash your clergy card.
Well, actually,
and
no one ever asked me for it. I just said, I'm from Friends Indeed and I'm a minister. And then they were all so baffled by it all anyway. They were grateful for anybody that would come in and spend 5 minutes.
Right.
But during that period of time, 25 years we did this work. All of our services were free of charge. Everybody wanted to hang out with Mike Nichols, so raising money was not a problem. John Remington, one of the actors in the community up here?
No.
He's, anyway, he was with Target, and we had film premieres of Mike's, and we had benefits all over the place where we made lots of money to support what we were doing. And as I say, all of our services were free of charge. So that was, and people started showing up. The organization was to provide spiritual and emotional support for anyone dealing with a life-threatening physical illness, caregiving, or grief and bereavement.
Right.
And here's what we did. We were not on a one-up, one-down basis. We weren't pretending that we had the answer to anything. But when people would show up, we might ask them, is your life working the way you're doing it? And if they said yes, fine, come on in. If it's not working so well, here are some other possibilities. And we would create an atmosphere in which people could come to out of themselves exactly what they need. We believe that every single person that came through the door already has in them everything they need for a healthy, happy, productive life.
And that was one of the tenets of this organization,
yes.
Friend Indeed?
Yes, exactly. And it was stunning. It was absolutely stunning.
And where did that thought come from? That's an interesting thought.
Well, Cynthia O'Neill had 100 years of 12-step work through Patrick, and I had been when my father was an alcoholic, so I did 12 years in Al-Anon after he died, working on my relationship with my father posthumously and healing that posthumously, which a lot of people don't believe that that's possible. But I am here to tell you it absolutely is possible. At the end of the play, I Never Sang for My Father, the actor comes down to the apron of the stage and says to the audience, death ends a life, but it does not end a relationship, which lingers on in the survivor's mind towards some final resolution which it perhaps never finds. that was my operating principle. And I mean,
A great line.
you know, I've been down so many roads, and the 25 years at Friends Indeed was absolutely stunning work. I mean, first of all, how we felt about these life-threatening, and ALS was one of the ones that came through the door. How we felt was that whatever shows up in your life is what shows up in your life. What you do with what shows up in your life is your work. You are not your HIV diagnosis. You are not your cancer diagnosis. You are not your ALS diagnosis. And are you going to die? Yes, for sure, but you appear to be alive right now. Can we work with that? And we all, at Friends Indeed, the entire staff, all decided to work on our lives together. Someone you should have on this show that you should talk about, who lives in Woodstock but is trying to come to Rhinebeck, is Eric Schneider, who was a speaker. He was head of therapy at Friends Indeed.
Okay.
And I had him at Rotary about a month ago. He was one of the he was my speaker. Anyway, I remember him saying one day, he looked at the staff. He was in charge of counseling at Friends Indeed. He looked at the entire staff. Things were starting to get a little sticky. We were all on each other, and it wasn't going so well. And so he said, I think we have to put us around an oval table, and I think we have to do some work on ourselves here, because if you think that working at Friends Indeed is about anything other than working on yourself, you're in the wrong job. And I remember going home that night and coming up out of the subway and thinking, holy moly, I have a job where I'm being paid to work on myself. Hallelujah, how good is that? And that's what that organization was about.
It sounds like all of the things in your life, from acting to that, to Gurdjieffian, and are about working on yourself.
Yes, exactly.
It sounds like it's been a good life for working on yourself.
The only journey worth taking is the one in. And honestly, when you meet people and you see, particularly young people, and when I did the thing, talk to them, I said, to look at a young person and tell them that everything you need, you have in you right now. You don't have to go looking for it out there. We're going to create a space in which you can begin to explore and see what resonates for you. Don't believe it because I'm telling you, but just understand that you need to verify everything you hear from me that might make any sense or no sense. Find out for yourself what resonates. And I mean, to tell someone that they're totally fine when they think they're a mess, find out, check it out. Let's see how this goes.
And for you, this journey within, is that part and parcel of your meditation practice?
Certainly my meditation practice is a part of it, yeah. But the interesting thing about the Gurdjieff work is it's work in life. I don't have to go someplace and sit down and be in a certain position and do a certain kind of breathing. I can be right now. I can switch my attention. I can see where my hands are. I can hear the sound of my voice. I see that one of my feet, the heel of my shoe, is slightly off and I can sense the weight of my body in the chair. And now my attention is on myself and I am more awake. I'm more conscious in this moment. But a thought will come, a feeling, an impression, it will take me away and I'll come back again. And it's constantly the practice of constantly coming back to being in my body, because the way to consciousness is, again, through a sense of it's not something I'm reading that tells me what I am. It's something that I'm experiencing. And,
right.
What we need to do is, as a culture, is we need to wake up. And every time I hear someone say, if you do such and such is going to happen. You know that? Right. Who died and made you God?
Right.
I mean, you don't know that. Even if you do the same thing the same way 100 times, the 101st time it could be different.
Right.
And that is so freeing. Once you get that in your bones, it's like everything is okay.
Right.
Nothing bad can happen here.
Right. So do you, I know some people who are, Gurdjieffians, and they meet with like-minded individuals,
Right.
Weekly or monthly or whatever.
Right.
Is there a group like that up here?
I haven't found one up here, but then again, I haven't really looked for one. The
Right.
main foundation that I was involved in is in Manhattan,
Right.
but they have bought a place. They used to have a place in Ardsley, and now
Okay.
and they sold that, and now I believe that the new work is at a place called Croton on Hudson.
Okay.
I think
Just
that's
south
what
of
it is.
here.
It's a they bought an estate, or I don't know all the particulars of that, but that's where work is done on weekends and that kind of thing. Yes, so and because of the pandemic, they've had sittings, which are like the Gurdjieff buzzword for a meditation is a sitting.
Okay.
So there'll be a sitting that's announced online, and you can zoom in and be part of it, and it's just sitting and being quiet and sensing yourself for an hour and not saying anything.
Right. I loved what
Try
you
that.
said about sensing yourself, your left heel on the floor like that.
Right.
How often do you feel called to do that?
Oh my God, I wish I could feel called more often than I am. When I wake up in the morning and before I've sort of accustomed myself, before I have a first sip of coffee, what I say in my little place where I'm living now, and I live alone, I say out loud, I wish to be. And then sensing my body, my whole body, I can be.
Okay. So you wake up, you say that out loud,
Mm-hmm.
and then you sense your whole body. You take stock of like, oh, my feet are touching the sheet,
exactly.
my ears against the pillow,
Exactly.
my hands. And when you take stock, do you work from your toes up, your head down, or just go whatever?
Whatever works.
Right. What an interesting way to wake up.
Right. Like right now, I'm looking at your body and your arms are crossed. So
Yeah.
what that tells me is that you're in judgment in some way.
Oh, well, I always am. I always am. But honestly, I eschew that sort of like body language reading of arms crossed, meaning.
But look at where my arms are, and I'm
They're-
holding onto the back of
they're
my chair.
behind you. I thought maybe your back hurt.
No. It's just about, awareness.
Yeah, this is a comfortable way for me to sit, and I do it despite
just
knowing how it comes across sometimes.
No, I'm just teasing.
I feel like I'm a pretty open person despite the crossed arms. But I love that idea of, especially as you described it right now, sitting and taking stock of how you were in space as a way to bring you into yourself.
Right. And whenever there's a fearful thought, I can go inside and I can okay, let me back up a little bit. In my already very long life, here's what I notice. Suffering is a part of the deal here.
Yeah.
The old and the ugly, the young and the beautiful, the rich and the poor. Nobody gets out of here without a piece of suffering.
Right.
Therefore, I posit that suffering is a part of our human experience, every single one of us.
Right.
Therefore, when suffering shows up, instead of thinking I've been singled out by the universe for my particular piece of suffering, I might, in a more enlightened moment, think, suffering is present. What has suffering come to teach me in this moment?
Right.
What can I learn through this piece of suffering? How can I be not totally identified by it? How can I place it as part of my experience and work with it?
And then are you actively grateful for the suffering, for bringing you
Absolutely
these
right.
lessons?
Gratitude is the first feeling out of the chute. There's no such thing as good or bad, right or wrong. There's only the lessons to be learned in the process. So it's neither good nor bad. One of my favorite ancient Chinese saying, the great way is simple for those with no preferences.
Okay.
How about that one?
Well,
Wrap that around you.
Take some mulling over that.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you give an example of that?
Well, it's not being identified with something so-called terrible happens. Something is happening. Terrible is a frame.
Right.
Cancer is neutral. dreadful cancer, horrible cancer, those are frames. Bad enough that I have to, and difficult enough to have to deal with the illness. Let's not confuse it and make it worse by getting caught up in the frame. There's nothing bad happening here. Just cancer is present. How can I use this? How can I work through it? How can I, God forbid, benefit from it? I mean, it's very hard when someone is deeply suffering and terrified to get that into them. But if you can take a moment and just think about it and understand that in a simpler way, it's like, okay, do I know what to do here? No. What do I know? I know that I'm sitting here right now and my two hands have just found themselves clasped together.
Yeah.
What am I holding on to? Okay, so I see, okay. I'm right in this moment, I see that I am attempting to speak about something that's deeply important to me and personal to me. So how do I then speak about that without sounding like some sort of I've got the answer, smart-ass kind of person?
And what is that thing? Do you have a particular thing in mind? Well, let me ask this thing. You're 80-something. I mean, you must have had moments of great suffering in your life, and probably in the not-too-distant past.
Yeah.
And you probably had moments of great suffering that were difficult for you to deal with the way you just described.
Definitely.
Can you want to share some of those and how you worked through that? I know, putting you in the spot here.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot, and it's well, I did that Friends Indeed gig for 25 years till 2015, so that took up a very big chunk of my time. And during all of that time, I was working on myself.
Right.
In that job, we would sit around and talk about these things all the time. Everybody stayed current with where they were, how they were feeling, what they were experiencing, what it might mean, what it can't mean. And when you are in a place where you can say, no matter what is happening, we don't know that anything bad is happening. We might not like it. We might think it's terrible, but we don't know anything bad is happening. It's just what's happening. And how do we know that? Because that's what's happening.
Right.
I'm not writing the script. I'm not charting the course. All I can do is show up for myself in whatever form I'm in whatever moment I'm in.
And are you very accepting of whatever form you show up in?
Yeah, I really am.
I bet it's a hard thing for lots of people.
Yes, well, I mean, once again, it's all in here. If I cannot be gracious and forgiving of myself, how can I possibly be forgiving of you?
Right. I guess, people say that. I've heard that logic a lot. But, then I think about preachers or, ministers, whoever, who were sermonizing, and the sermon is great. And then they go out and do something horrible.
Right.
Or they did something horrible the week before or whatever. And the words and the thoughts and the possibility of like motivating the congregation to do good is all wonderful. But then, they, in their personal life, were horrible.
They aren't the best teachers, are they?
Well, I don't know.
If nothing more, beware the becoming a nation of sheep, where you tie up to something, and this would include the Gurdjieff work,
right?
Where you were told again and again and again, verify this teaching, verify it with yourself. Don't just take what is being said here.
Right. And so how in the Gurdjieff work do you verify the teachings? I mean, other than just the experience that makes you think, okay, this is good.
Well, I can verify it by suddenly placing my attention on my body and wondering what's going on in my body right now. Where are my hands? Where are my feet? I can broaden my peripheral vision. I can hear the sound of my voice.
Okay.
And in this studio, which is a tiny, cozy, wonderful little enclave, it's easy to do it in here because this feels like a very supportive little environment. But when I go outside and go through the door and cross the street to my car, I might as well be in Chester, Pennsylvania. I mean, we don't know. it's constantly having to go back again and again. It's been often said, don't try to do this work when you're crossing the street. To realize that you're asleep crossing the street's probably not the best time to, or when you're driving a car.
Unless you realize that in the realization you wake up.
If you've been doing it for a lot of years and you have some practice where you don't become that which you abhor.
Or there you go. You're bringing it full circle. So how did you first get exposed to Gurdjieff?
With Hal Douglas told me about it.
Okay.
Yeah. And
I'm not sure I connected that.
He brought me to a meeting, and I met a woman named Cora Siegel, who was one of my first teacher. And I cried my way through every single meeting, cried and cried and cried and cried. And one day I said to her at a meeting, I said, am I ever going to be able to share or talk about this work without crying, talk about my life without crying? And she said to me, Cynthia, you will one day stop crying. And then when you cry again, you will cry for the right reasons.
Okay. Well, so now I got a bunch more questions. When you're crying for the wrong reasons, what was it inside you that was resonating
My
and
history,
coming out in tears?
Growing up at an alcoholic home,
right?
Just.
And then you stopped crying, and did you cry again? And what was the right reason?
When I move to tears now, I'm usually, I'm not just leaking my tears all over the place. This doesn't mean I don't still have painful moments that bring me to tears, but in the process of learning about myself and what makes me tick and what my button pushers are and where I am, and plus so many years. We're talking 50 plus years. That's a long time, half a century plus that I've been doing this.
And what are some of your button pushes or triggers or?
What are the triggers?
And have they been with you your whole life? Do people get new triggers? I don't know.
Of course they do.
Yeah,
of course.
Do you have new triggers and old triggers?
Oh yeah, sure. So someone was speaking at a meeting and they were trying to sell their pitch, and as they were speaking, I was thinking that person needs voice therapy, and then I noticed that that's what I was thinking. And then I woke up to the fact that I was in judgment about this person who was speaking. And then I had this fantasy about how I could help them with speech therapy, and then I saw myself doing that inside myself. And just took this whole little journey.
Yeah.
And then it was over.
Which seems pretty typical of the way people think and fantasize and stuff.
Yeah.
And so do you do speech therapy? Do you know anything about speech therapy?
No, but I've worked
But in
enough.
the fantasy.
No, but I've worked. I've worked enough, to be able to do a lot of help with that. Yeah.
So you're in this meeting, and somebody needed some kind of speech therapy. Did you speak to them? Did you say,
No,
I noticed this thing, I can help?
No. I just thought of something that an acting teacher said to us once in class. Concerned that I wouldn't be heard in the balcony.
Right.
This was before everything was mic'd. And the acting teacher said, speak with the intent to be heard. That means that you can say the tiniest thing and you will be heard because your intention is to be heard. Nice.
So do you do any public speaking now?
Call me.
What?
Call me.
Call me.
I'm mostly just kind of, getting used to this life up here. And then after having moved from an apartment I've lived in for 53 years.
And where was that?
It was on the Upper West Side, on 96th Street between Central Park West and Columbus. And then moving, all that I had to divest myself of just to move out of that apartment. I remember calling my 2 adult children saying, I am no longer warehousing your life.
Oh, nice.
You have a month to get your stuff out of here. Otherwise,
month.
it's going to be outside the back door.
And where were they living at that point?
My daughter was living in Florida, and my son was living in Brooklyn.
And did they show up
Oh,
and
God,
take
yes.
their stuff?
They got their stuff, yeah.
And did they leave a lot of stuff, too? Or did
No, first of all, I'm not much of a hoarder or a saver, so
Right.
it was pretty streamlined anyway.
Nice.
So I moved with what I needed for me, and then I had to downsize yet again when I moved a second time up here.
Right.
Because I moved from a 2-story condominium to a 1-level apartment with just tiny spaces,
So you got rid of a lot of the trappings of a life.
I love getting rid of that
Bric-a-brac,
stuff.
curios,
Yes,
sentimental
yes.
objects.
Yes, I'm not particularly sentimental.
Well, that's my next question is, do you look back on any of the things you just jettisoned and think, gee, I wish I still had that souvenir from
No, I'm
Sardinia?
quite sure that I'm never, ever going to poach a fish again in the stainless steel fish poacher that I was sure I had to have in the 70s or 80s. And guess where it is now? I gave it to Wendy Maitland, and she gave it to her partner who owns the tasting room. So now my fish poacher is there.
Nice.
No, I don't. I just, once again, there's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad. As the Dalai Lama says, when you lose, don't lose the lesson. So that's kind of what I'm trying to operate out of.
Right. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
Huh.
And also, I think it was Wavy Gravy in the 60s who said,
God.
if you don't have a sense of humor, it just isn't funny.
Yeah. Well, so Wavy Gravy makes me wonder, like, were you a wild youngster?
I had some wildness, yes.
Yeah.
You can bring me in another day. We'll do a story on all of the wealthy and famous men I was involved with.
Oh, boy.
But someone said, you should write a book about that. I said, why? What would anybody care? But she said, you should write a book. And I said, yeah, I can call it They're All Dead Now.
Yeah. Well, so, you write a book maybe just for your kids. They might like to hear all this stuff.
Poof, no.
Poof. What do you mean, no?
No, I'm not a journal taker. I mean, I still have my diaries just because of following along the places I've gone and things I've done.
Right.
But I don't journal.
So do the diaries tell the story of They're All Dead Now?
They might, yeah. I'd have to.
When did you start keeping diaries?
Well, as long as I had an agent and I kept going on auditions, I had to, it was just,
okay.
What are you doing today? And
not necessarily a narrative, but
no,
your desk diary.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Of appointments and stuff.
Yeah.
And so you have them for 50, 60 some years.
No, I don't have them for that many years because I think that I probably at one point I got rid of some of them. But I just noticed the other day, it looked like 1971. It looks like it goes back that far. So
why do you think your kids wouldn't be interested in hearing the tawdry tales of their mother's youth?
They've probably heard more from me. I mean, you've just spent this time with me. You don't think that they haven't heard 3/4 of what I've been talking about here ad nauseum? No, they've
heard them all. They've heard it all.
You're right.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not attached to the ongoingness of it all. Everybody's here on their own, his or her own journey, and we're here to learn whatever lessons we've come to learn. And the question I continually ask myself is, what the F am I doing here?
And what is the answer that comes back to you?
Pay attention.
Pay attention.
Yeah.
Though you also seem deeply devoted to serving others.
It's funny I just kind of came in with that, I think.
Do you think, is that somehow connected to pay attention?
Probably, but my mother was a nurse. And my stepfather was a doctor, and I had a couple of uncles that were doctors.
Uh-huh. And your dad, was he in the picture?
My father was, so this is the one I worked on for 12 years in Al-Anon. He was a lawyer. He was a trial lawyer, and workman's compensation was his specialty. But he was also a World War II veteran.
Oh, boy.
He, Purple Heart, Oak Leaf Cluster, plane gone down, all of the horrors of warfare. And when he returned from war, he never talked about it to anyone, no one. My mother was one of those, he would wake up in the night screaming, and from a night, just the classic stuff. It was called in those days shell-shocked.
Right.
Now it's PTSD.
Right.
But never once was there ever anything. You're a perfectly fine young man. We send you off to war. You learn how to kill people, and then you come home and you're supposed to look at your 2 cute little daughters and your wife and continue your life again? No, it doesn't work like that. And that's why war doesn't work. That's why everything after war doesn't work. I think that I spent enough time in Al-Anon working on my relationship with my father after he died to forgive him and forgive myself, because I stepped away from him for many years because I couldn't deal with the pain. Could not deal with the pain. And there was a time when I couldn't have told you anything about this without choking up and crying.
Right.
And there was a time when I couldn't say the word father without... And did I feel terrible that for 23 years I kept his grandchildren from him? Because he was still drinking. He was then married to my stepmother, who was from Augusta, Georgia.
Oh, boy.
She used to call me up and say, Cindy, gal, your daddy loves you so much. And she'd be drunk, too. I thought, But it took me understanding that I could have gone through the rest of my life blaming and saying I'm the adult child of an alcoholic and operating out of that, or I could work through it and put it where it needs to be and just and move on and know that I am grateful for the alcoholic father I had, because it led me to all of the places I needed to go to work on my life. Right. Once again, not so much what you come in with, it's what you do with what shows up in your life.
Right. Amazing. And that's what a fabulous thought and attitude. Do your children share that?
Well, my children. I have a daughter. I don't know if you're into astrology, but all you need to know about her is she's a Gemini.
And you're a Capricorn.
Right. Anyway, she has 2 bachelor's degrees from Georgetown, one in languages and linguistics, and an accelerated second Bachelor of Science degree in nursing. Then she got a master's degree in nursing and went to Frontier University to become a midwife. So she's a certified nurse midwife, has these 2 bachelor's degrees. She has a master's degree in nursing. She's a certified nurse midwife. She's a certified integral yoga instructor. She's a certified lactation consultant. She's a vegan chef, and she's a royal pain in the butt a lot of the time.
Has she always been that way?
No. Well, she's been on her own. She's been charting her own course since she was about 5 years old.
Okay.
And all I did was follow her along so that she didn't fall off the path and kill herself.
Right.
But she was as motivated as anybody has ever been. But she makes the mistake, and it's the difference between being a grandparent and a parent. She makes the mistake of thinking that because she knows X, Y, and Z, that she can protect her children from going down the same roads. No, that's not your job. As I said to her, give your children the dignity of their own life. Let them fall on their faces. You don't have to like what they're doing. You can say you don't like it.
Does she see that you did that with her?
Well, I mean, I don't know that she'd ever admit it, but she probably does.
Uh-huh. And now let me ask about this. I mean, people talk a lot about generational trauma, and, your dad was an alcoholic. That's a lot of stuff. You made peace with it, but still things filter down. They have a way of getting down to, future generations. Do you think that she's dealing with any of that, and that's getting in her way?
She could be. But she has her things that she's doing in her life. You know, Khalil Gibran said in the book The Prophet about children, your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. You may seek to be like them, but seek not to make them like you. So when you operate from that thing, my children have come through me, and where I am today is not where I was when they were babies. And I was going through my garbage as they were growing. I mean, you know, we're all in. However, that's what happened. So where are you now? There's a wonderful thing that they say in AA, which is one of my favorite slogans. You can look back, but don't stare. How good
Love
is that?
I never heard that. That's
Isn't
so
that
good.
Great.
Yeah.
You can look back, but don't stare.
Right.
And that's kind of where I am with all that stuff.
I love that. And the Buddhists talk about like letting go of things that are not meant for you, which is a similar thought.
There's not enough time. And as at this stage of my life, there's another, I keep quoting all of these things, but what the hell, they're worth quoting. And that is famous Native American saying is that when we die, all of our memories should be as light as a feather.
Huh.
I love that.
And so, I mean, that requires excising the heavy memories.
Yeah. Well, every time people talk about the epidemic of dementia, I have my own feelings about that. Certainly, I think memory is overrated. I think it's much more important to be in the moment than to be in your memories, because that's dead. That's ancient history already.
Right.
And very few people, if they do remember, they've altered the story so many times it's unrecognizable. But
right.
But that's a judgment. I didn't mean to say that.
I've seen people succumb to dementia.
I have too.
And right now it's happening to a friend, and the memories are fading. Is an interesting thing is he's becoming more and more just sort of pure love, because he's a loving person.
Absolutely.
And it's really something to see.
I have a friend in New York who constantly talks about his memory and how bad it is. And I've known this man for 20 plus years. Get over yourself.
Right.
I mean, you know, so what? You can't remember. You still, your shoes are tied. You still know who I am. I mean, you know.
Well, again, this is self-acceptance. It's hard for people. So Gurdjieff, in addition to, you know, making you more aware of yourself in various ways, does the philosophy discuss specific things like self-acceptance and
not really
generational trauma? Or
no, not really.
It's just a philosophy on how to be here.
It's
now.
Consciousness, waking up.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that. And tell me again, and we'll close the show with this, how you wake up every morning.
Sometimes I stand up and before my first sip of coffee, I say out loud, I wish to be.
Wonderful. And I wish to thank you, Cynthia Burke, for being here.
Thank you.
What a beautiful talk. What a beautiful person you are. And everybody, thanks for tuning in. Thanks, Jen Hammoud, for being here and recording this. And thanks to Matt Rosenberg for the station, and for Patricia Wynn for the spot right here. I rarely get to thank everybody. And so I'm happy to do so now. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.